Happy day and welcome to the June General Assembly of Independent Guåhan. We are excited today to discuss an important topic, water sovereignty, which is a continuation of our sovereignty series that we've done over the last few months. And we are also going to honor Maga'taotao Senator Pilar Cruz Lujan. So before we do that, we'd like to first do the Inifresi. So if you don't mind joining me, we'll go ahead and say the Inifresi together. Inifresi. Ginen imastakulo gihinasoku, imastakalum gikurasonhu, sanimasfigu naninasi hu fresen maisazu harabai hu protehi, san hu defendi, ihinengi, ikotura, ilengwahi, airi, hanam, zanitanot samoru. Ni renshaku riratsu gininasu tata. Esti hu afitma gihilui Biblia zanibanderahu ibanderan Guåhan. All right, Sizos Maasi for joining us today. Guahusi Victoria Lola Leon Guerrero, and I am the co-chairperson for the Educational Development and Research Committee of Independent Guåhan. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Independent Guåhan is the larger organization that supports the efforts of the official Independence Task Force. Independent Guåhan empowers the Chamorro people to reclaim our sovereignty as a nation, inspired by the strength of our ancestors and with love for future generations. We educate and unify all who call our island home to build a sustainable and prosperous independent future. Independent Guåhan is a wonderful organization made up of volunteers who have been focused entirely on educational and outreach efforts centered around imagining an independent future for our island. We are actively involved in various types of educational efforts and also play a key role in the Commission on Decolonization as an official task force. And so through COD, we participate in efforts like the recent study, Maga'taotao, a self-determination study for Guåhan, in which the Commission on Decolonization hired international expert Dr. Carlisle Corbin to do a self-governance study of the island. So the first part of the study looks at the degree to which Guam is not self-governing. And then the second part of the study, authored by Dr. Ken Cooper and Joe Bradley, economist Joe Bradley, looks at what could alternative futures look like under the three status options of independence, free association, and statehood. And so Maga'taotao is an incredible resource. It's massive in terms of the amount of information that it contains, but also in terms of its impact moving forward and understanding what's available to us as we decolonize. So you can download a copy for free at decol.guam.gov or pick up a free print copy at the Guam Museum. Another wonderful program Independent Guåhan Another wonderful program of Independent Guåhans is our Fanatsu podcast. And so just yesterday, Fanatsu hosted a conversation with Dr. Christine DeLisle about her recent publication, Placental Politics. And so you can tune in live on the Fanatsu Facebook or YouTube page where you'll find this and many other incredible podcasts. Last but most certainly not least, every year Independent Guåhan holds the Nat Latlat Songs of Freedom concert, in which we celebrate the idea that our freedom is a way in which we can express ourselves, not just through music and the arts, but also our vision to keep living, right? Natlatla, to continue to give life. And so we used to have it every year at Adaloop. And then throughout the pandemic, we've been doing televised concerts. And this year we're going back to live in a smaller space. Songs of Freedom will be held this year on August 6, 2022 from 3 to 6 p.m. at the Guam Museum. So please stay tuned in all of our social media and on our website for more information about the concert. We already have an incredible lineup of musicians and poets that will be sharing their talents with us on that day. So we hope to see you there. All right, so Independent Guåhan, every General Assembly, we honor different people in our community who have been heroes in these efforts. So who have throughout their life dedicated their work and their service to empowering our people and to embracing and sharing ideas of decolonization and independence. The term Maga'taotao was originally coined by the late Eddie Leonguerel Benavente, who was the co-founder of Nation Chamorro, and in whose honor we celebrate these Maga'taotao in our history. So this General Assembly, we wanted to honor a woman whom we felt we wanted to pay tribute to because she recently passed away, and we felt that it was important for our island to know her story and how it connects to this movement. So Independent Guåhan believes that Senator Pilar Cruz Lujan is a Maga'taotao in many ways. She passed away earlier this month on June 12, 2022. And her legacy as a public educator and local lawmaker is one that we consider to be visionary in scope and impact. She graduated from George Washington High School in 1951 and continued her education with a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in elementary school administration and an education specialist degree. She was a passionate educator who championed the institution of Chamorro language in public education, serving as both an educator and administrator in the Guam public school system. She served as Associate Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction and was a consultant for bilingual education, where she was responsible for putting the Chamorro language and culture in all Guam elementary schools. She rose to Acting Director of Education in 1976 and chairperson of the Board of Education in 1977. She was a Chamorro language instructor at the University of Guam, and she also became a Chamorro translator for the drafting of the Guam Constitution. In the 1980s, Senator Lujan worked as a Chamorro newscaster with the Public Broadcasting Service radio station KGTF, and also entered her political career in 1983. She served in the 17th through 22nd Guam legislatures, a service of 6 terms that ended in 1994. She served as the chairwoman of the Democratic Party of Guam. While serving as senator, she was also a member of the Guam Commission on Self-Determination. In 1993, she testified before the U.S. Subcommittee on Insular and International Affairs and addressed the Committee on Natural Resources. Her statements and written testimony powerfully argued, for Guam, nothing less than our liberty and sense of dignity as a people are at stake in assuring that we achieve self-determination through a process which ends our second-class political status. We are in a new era of change. It is in the best interest of both Guam and the federal government to institute change so that decolonization can be achieved. And we will not accept the status quo when we know we can do better economically and politically. Our land is the foundation of our culture, and restoration of our land and culture in a just and reasonable manner must not be viewed as a threat. We will not allow our rights to be extinguished for many reasons, but primarily because it is wrong. No matter how prosperous or otherwise well-off they may be, colonial status for people who live under the American flag is indefensible. As these quotes make clear, nearly 30 years ago, Senator Lujan was championing sovereignty for Guåhan. Today, we honor her for her wisdom, leadership, and tireless efforts and actions for justice. She helps us think expansively about the new era for decolonization and sovereignty for our island across a range of issues like education and natural resources. She is an inspiration to all of us. I think that it is important for us today, 30 years later, to read and reflect on these words and see how they can help guide us as we move forward in our efforts. And in fact, I feel like these words are a powerful way for us to introduce our esteemed panelists today. We are very honored to welcome members of Protect Guam Water, who will be talking on our topic of water sovereignty in today's presentation. Our two panelists are Samantha Marley Barnett, who is the project manager for Protect Guam Water, an Indigenous youth leadership program under NIHI, which is dedicated to protecting Guam's land and water resources. Samantha is also the co-founder of Tutdung Marianas, a collective of Chamorro artists and activists. She is a third-year PhD student in the Indigenous Politics program in the Political Science Department at UH Manoa. Joining Sam today is Isabella Olalia. She is a recent graduate from George Washington High School. She has been an intern with Protect Guam Water since the program first began. Additionally, she has been dubbed one of the 5 GTA youth leaders for 2021 to 2022. Isabella will start her first year of college this fall, majoring in Chamorro Studies for education with the goal and passion to spread the language and culture to the youth of the island. Her other passions include gardening, weaving, and writing poetry. I think it's really powerful to read your bios alongside what we learned about Senator Lujan, because in many ways, you are the manifestation of her early efforts to protect the language and the land. And so we are honored to have you with us today. I'll go ahead and pull up your PowerPoint and we'll get started. Oh, okay. I am also not as technologically savvy, so thank you all for bearing with me. Here we go. All right, Hafaday and welcome, Protect Guam Water.
Hafaday, thank you Independent Guåhan for having us today, and thank you Lola for that beautiful introduction. We're really excited to be here. So again, I'm Samantha and I'm here with Bella, one of our youth leaders. So Protect Guam Water is really focused on equipping and empowering the next generation of protectors. Part of that work is having a youth leadership program, which Bella is a part of, and also doing a series of community engagement activities, as well as classroom outreach presentations, which we've been delivering over the past few months in our local high school and college classrooms. So today we're going to be sharing a version of the presentation that we show in these classrooms. And I'll hand it off to Bella for the next slide, please.
All right, so we're from an organization called Protect Guam Water, which is an Indigenous youth leadership program under NIHI, which provides youth such as myself with a hands-on media advocacy opportunity dedicated to protecting Guam's land and water resources.
Next slide, please. Today, we're going to talk to you about our most important resource, our water, where it comes from, why it's in danger, and how you can help.
So in this, oh, actually, can we go back? The where does our water come from one? Thank you so much. Okay, so in this slide, we're going to be talking about where our water comes from, the water that we use to brush our teeth, to take a bath, wash our clothes. Where does it all come from? So around 20% of it comes from the southern rivers and is purchased from the Navy. And this is its own problem. But today we're going to be talking about our primary source of water that supplies 80% of our community with water. It's called the Northern Guam Lands Aquifer.
Okay, next slide, please. An aquifer isn't exactly an underground lake or pool, but it is sort of like nature's storage tank. It has layers of permeable materials like rock and sand that hold and transmit water. Water sits below this natural filtration system. Guam's aquifer is massive and it stretches from central Guam to the north. It's called the Guam Northern Lens Aquifer.
Our northern aquifer provides 80% of our fresh water. GWA installs wells that pull water out of the aquifer to distribute to homes, businesses, and schools. Who lives, works, and goes to school at these places? People like you and me, our parents, our friends, local and military families, children, visitors, and tourists, and so on.
The Department of Navy is currently constructing a massive live fire training range complex on top of our primary source of water, next to the most populated village on our island and along a pristine coastline. 6.7 million lead bullets will be fired over our aquifer and coastline every year. The construction of the range has also required the clearing of hundreds of acres of ancient limestone forests, which worked in concert with the aquifer as a natural filtration system. While the Navy claims that contamination won't be an issue, today we're going to show you official statements, studies, and data that counter this claim and demonstrate the risk of water contamination to our community.
The first document that demonstrates a risk of contamination is a paper released by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, in 2012. It looked at 30 military installations and firing ranges in the US, including Hawaii, and documented the chemicals left behind in the soil and sometimes in groundwater. Chemicals left behind include toxic heavy metal residues like lead.
Some of the chemicals found in groundwater around firing ranges include, as Bella said, lead, RDX, and HMX. These chemicals are used in military explosives and are found in and around firing ranges. Many of these chemicals are dangerous to humans and other life forms. Lead, for instance, is poisonous even in small amounts, and it can cause kidney problems, high blood pressure, and heart disease. The EPA has also determined that it probably causes cancer. Very high exposure to lead can cause death.
Lead poisoning in water is a very serious issue. As we see in Flint, Michigan, where lead in water is especially harmful to babies and children, even in the womb and at low levels of exposure, it can affect development and intelligence, and can cause damage to the brain as well as to other organs like the kidneys.
Contamination is possible. These words are drawn directly from an EPA study from 2012. They state that chemicals from the firing range may leach into the soil and in some cases can contaminate groundwater.
The second document that acknowledges a risk of contamination is a document produced by the Navy. The Navy produced an environmental impact statement, or EIS, outlining the impacts of the military buildup, including the firing range complex. An environmental impact statement is a document that is required by national law and acknowledges chemicals used at firing ranges, including dangerous chemicals like lead that have the potential to seep into the ground, contaminate groundwater, remain in the soil for years, or even end up in the ocean as runoff. Contamination of our coastline and ocean is also a very serious issue, as most nations in this region are protecting their resources and coastal areas to ensure their communities survive climate change.
The third document that we're going to look at is the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency website. While all of the sources that we've shared today are public documents, this one is a bit easier to read. The US EPA very clearly acknowledges that contamination around firing ranges is a major issue. We encourage you to visit this link for yourself and read it, but we'll read this highlighted line today. The Department of Defense, or DoD, suspects or acknowledges contamination by military munitions of an estimated 15 million acres of land. Contamination of soil and groundwater is a big concern.
And it's not just us. The CNMI's water was at risk as well. We aren't the only ones who are concerned about these studies. While the military increases training activities in Guam, they're doing the same in the NMI. In 2015, the government of the NMI found that the military had plans for live-fire training on Pagan and Tinian that would take place over their aquifer just like ours. And just like Guam's case, the military left out this information even though they were aware of the risk they pose to the CNMI's water.
So what does history tell us? We encourage you to think of any recent news about military contamination. While there's a long history of contamination when it comes to the military, today we're going to focus on 2 examples.
The first example is Red Hill in Hawaii. If you heard about Red Hill, you might know that Did you know that people had to move out of their homes and into hotels because it wasn't safe to shower? Nearly 6,000 people got sick and had to seek treatment for nausea, headaches, rashes, and other ailments. 4,000 military families were forced out of their homes and are in hotels. 72 public schools had to be tested for lead in drinking water. This is an ongoing crisis.
Our second example is here in Guam, down in Molesio at Cocos Lagoon. The military caused widespread PCB contamination throughout the island, and research shows that this may have resulted in cancer and negative health effects, even death, for residents in Molesio from exposure to military contamination. Think of all the fishermen, families, and even tourists who spend time in those waters. This history teaches us that we must advocate for the protection of our natural resources. Our lives quite literally depend on it.
In addition to contamination, the construction of this firing range complex has destroyed hundreds of acres of ancient limestone forest, including recovery habitats for endangered species.
And disturbed historical sites, including sacred burial grounds of our ancestors.
So we know that this information is heavy and can be incredibly overwhelming, but we aren't helpless. Other communities have taken action to protect their resources. In the CNMI, protectors were able to stop Pagan from being used for harmful military exercises. And although the damage can't be undone, in Hawaii, protectors were able to shut down Red Hill to stop fuel from being leaked into their water.
And we know that protecting our land and water is our obligation as Chamorros and other islanders. As Chamorro people, we believe that the land and ocean are quite literally our ancestors and that we are their protectors. All across Micronesia and the Pacific, our communities know that we are obligated to take care of our land and water for future generations, just as we would take care of our grandmother or grandfather. If we come together, we can fulfill this obligation.
So we ask that you join us in protecting our water. One way that you can help is to sign and share our petition. To protect our coastline and aquifer, our group has launched a petition calling on the United States Senate Committee on Armed Services to stop construction of the firing range complex and calling on United States Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland to use her position to advocate for the protection of the aquifer, and calling on local leaders to support our petition through a roundtable, resolution, and public hearing.
Another way that you can help and stay up to date with our efforts and what we've been doing is by following us on Instagram, sharing our posts, and watching out for ways that you can get involved. We do have a public hearing coming up in support of our resolution, which essentially mirrors the asks that are in the petition. And we're hoping to have that in August. So any news as that gets confirmed, we will share on our social media. So that's all we have today for the presentation, and we can go ahead and open it up to Q&A.
Viva, si Zeus and Saina Maasi for that wonderful and informative presentation. So those tuning in online, please don't be shy. Please leave some comments and questions for our panelists. I'll go ahead and start with some that have already come in. First, we have, do does private development atrocities like Vista Del Mar also threaten our water supply?
I think, well, there's other community orgs like Protect which have done a lot of great organizing around issues like this, making sure that our people's voices are heard and that we're able to advocate for the protection of all of our land. I'm not sure about the specifics of this situation, but I think turning to other community leaders who have worked to advocate for that and listening to their concerns and yeah, just always being really cautious when we have issues like development coming up and more of our coastline changing, because we can see the impacts of how that's changed a lot of our livelihoods so far.
Great, thank you. The next question actually is going to be a combo of two questions that came in. First, someone had asked if Independent Guåhan is planning on organizing a political candidate forum for this year's election. That is something we definitely do every election season, and we'll be working, if not with Independent Guåhan, then with the Finogi Coalition to try to organize one, because I do believe this is a very important election. Which leads us nicely into the next question, which is who are elected leaders that have been strong about protecting our water? So are there any elected leaders that you've been working with? And also just kind of adding on to that, what are some things we want to look for in a leader, right? In our leaders, what are some things our leaders can do to protect Guåhan's water?
Yeah, I think we've so far been working really closely with Senator Sabina Perez, who's always been a really strong advocate for protecting the environment. She also emerged from Protect and has done a lot of grassroots community organizing. So we really admire her. We've worked a bit with Senator Chelina Nelson as well. She hosted our roundtable discussion a few months back. But I think in terms of leadership, part of what our organization is really focused on is uplifting youth leadership and giving youth the opportunities to kind of be comfortable and grow their confidence in being able to advocate for the protection of our resources. So I think shifting away from solely focusing on elected leaders and really returning to community empowerment as well. This is a responsibility that we all have to protect our resources and our lands and waters. And yeah, that's just something we've been really focused on, is making this information accessible. Because like we were kind of sharing in the presentation, a lot of what comes out in military documents or even in APA documents is really difficult language to share. So kind of doing the work that we've done in classroom presentations. Bella's also been a part of our youth cohort. So like passing out flyers and just starting conversations with people at Chamorro Village and at the food trucks. I think that's one way that we're looking at growing leadership, is like taking young people, speaking in classrooms and giving them these opportunities to become educated on these issues, but also advocate for themselves and put this into our own words. We should all, especially as young people, be empowered to speak about what's important to us, to be empowered to protect the next generation and to honor the work of so many of our ancestors. I don't know, Bella, maybe if you want to just add to that, like what it's been like for you, kind of working on growing your skills as a leader.
Honestly, it's really been just a time of growth for me working with Protect Guam Water. I really have learned a lot about work ethic in general, always like coming from a place of love and fighting for these issues. And also doing the work that we are doing, especially like in the classroom presentations, it's making it very accessible and digestible so that more people can be aware on a level that they can understand. Because a lot of the times this sort of stuff is so complicated to just like on the surface level. So in doing it in the way that we are, I feel that more people are being aware in ways that are easier for them. So it's easier to share, easier to spread, and yeah.
Great, thank you both. I also wanted to share a comment that had come in. Saina Ma'asi Protect Guam Water. When the military tells us how dangerous their own activities are, we should listen. I want to turn that into a question. not a lot of people get access to the documents that you shared. What is some advice in terms of how to find this information and, why it's important to kind of stay abreast with what's happening with military activity on the island?
Yeah, so the documents that we were pulling on were mainly the environmental impact statements, which were produced by the military, drawing from their own studies. And I think those are available, like if you just Google Guam EIS. And then also we're really encouraging people to look at this particular Environmental Protection Agency study, which was put out in 2012. Because the facts are really there. Like we've drawn from so many sources produced by the military, produced by agencies coming out of the US federal government that really clearly state that contamination, there's an incredible risk for contamination. Not only that, but that we've seen it happen so many times in our own history and in other places throughout the US where these kinds of firing ranges exist. So I think it's really important. We're really just taking documents from the federal government and from the US military and pulling out quotes that are most striking and that kind of get to the core of their argument. So yeah, it's not anything that we're making up. It's really obvious by just doing simple research, by looking at the Environmental Protection Agency website. All of this information is readily available, even if it's not always easy to read. So I think part of the work is knowing that our community has a right to this information and trying to share it with as many people as possible. But yeah, I think that's really what we've been focused on, is like taking these documents and trying to just, particularly in working with our young people, like building up their confidence in like, yeah, we're addressing these federal agencies or like the US military, but what we have to say is valid. What our youth have to say matters, and what they care about matters.
Awesome. Our next question comes from a viewer who states, Guam EPA is the management agency of clean water. This person worked in the early 90s with the late Melvin Borja and others to protect the island resources against pollution. Have you gotten to know them and advocated directly with Guam EPA?
Yes, so Guam EPA attended our roundtable that we had back in April, and they were able to share kind of the status of permitting in terms of the firing range. So another kind of component of our work is working with these various government agencies to just kind of compile and see what the status is of construction at the firing range. We've also been able to meet with WERI, or Water Environmental Research Institute of the Western Pacific, and they've kind of shared some of their findings and some of their concerns. So we are really actively working with conducting research and having these meetings with community stakeholders.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, I see, hear, and live the Inifresi, but how can we achieve this? So I guess sort of like thinking about the Inifresi and what we're pledging, how do we live our Inifresi? How do we live this pledge?
Ella, did you have any thoughts, or you want to chime in?
I'm sorry, I'm having like difficulty with my internet right now.
Oh, it's okay.
Wait, can you repeat the question?
Sure. When you think about like the Inifresi and what we pledged to do in the Inifresi, how can we achieve that? How can we better live our Inifresi?
I think when I think about that personally, it's really just about respecting the land and the water, just because it takes care of us. And so, like we mentioned in our presentation, we're obligated to protect it in the same way that it cares for us.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. The next question is, this viewer says they've heard that this problem is also occurring in the other Mariana Islands. How are we coming together to make sure we are advocating for all of our islands?
Yeah, that's also really important to us, even in just not getting caught up in like, I think a lot of this work can be really draining when you're only focusing on like we have to respond to everything that's happening. We're on such a tight timeline, and it can feel, I think, really easy to get like sucked down into that. So part of what we wanted to share about Pagan and looking at what's going on in the rest of the Marianas is like drawing hope from what protectors in our sister islands have been able to do, and kind of what's happening there. And also just really connecting these struggles, like looking at what's happening in Guam is not unique, right? Like the military had plans for the entire archipelago. And I think it's really important for us. We kind of lose the sense of scale when we're only looking at one particular part of the buildup at a time. And I think that's also by design. Like if we're only looking at this one particular firing range or like this one piece of land loss, we're not seeing the entire scale of what's happening in terms of throughout our islands, throughout our waters with like the MIT and the MERC and all of this kind of live fire training that's happening that's affecting our coastline. So I think we're really trying to be able to, the first step, right, is like drawing those connections and helping people to understand what's happening across our archipelago. We've also been pretty focused on advocacy and growing solidarity, even across the Pacific. We were able to meet with members of the Red Hill Protectors and the Sierra Club when they were here in Guam a few weeks ago. And kind of just, I think too, it's really important to look at other struggles and how they've succeeded, just so we're able to be able to stay energized in our own struggles, looking at other places and other communities and what they've been able to do and how we can continue to empower each other.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. The next question is, what is the military stance on addressing Protect Guam's waters concern? It seems they are acknowledging concerns, but not doing anything about it. So have you been in conversation with the military, and how have they addressed your concerns?
We had a roundtable, like we were mentioning, which was kind of discussing some of our concerns, and that was an opportunity for us to present the research that we've compiled so far. We haven't had any kind of direct responses or resolutions. When we've posed questions to the military, or their answers, I think, have been pretty short-sighted. But one of the things that we're working on, we're having a meeting with Governor Leon Guerrero, and I believe members of CMCC, it's like civilian military coordinating something. But yeah, so working to continue those partnerships. Yeah, and continuing the research and being able to pose those questions in that way.
Great, thank you. So next, we wanted to just take a bit of a pause and encourage folks tuning in to please send in some questions. As we wait for more questions, we wanted to share some footage of the roundtable that you held. Thank you for your patience. We're going to try that one more time with sound.
Members of an indigenous youth leadership program called Protect Guam Waters delivered a nearly hour-long presentation on why the live fire training range currently under construction at Northwest Field poses a grave danger to the northern Guam lens aquifer that supplies more than 80% of the island's water.
As indigenous Chamorros, we believe that the land and the ocean are quite literally our ancestors, and that we are obligated to care for them in the same way that we would care for our grandmother and our grandfather.
The range footprint, or the area where the range is being constructed, is the process of being entirely cleared of vegetation, which serves as a natural filtration system for the aquifer. According to the final SEIS, over 6.7 million rounds of munitions will be fired every year.
Given the porous nature of limestone underlying NWF and Anderson South, and the ability of rain and surface water runoff to percolate rapidly through limestone to the groundwater lens beneath, there is cause for concern of water contamination.
And the lengthy list of concerns continued. Also testifying was Attorney Matthew Adams, who represented the CNMI government over environmental concerns with the Tinian Joint Military Training Facility.
What all of that research tells us is that the risks are especially high where geology gives contaminated runoff an easy path to get into the aquifer. In those environments, contaminants that get picked up at the surface never get filtered out. It's just too risky from an environmental perspective to kick the can down the road in that way without any specific commitments. These are issues that DoD should be expected to really nail down before the ranges are complete and before live fire training begins.
He said DoD admits that the Northern Lands Aquifer is fragile, but doesn't fully address a 2012 U.S. EPA issue paper on what will happen if contamination is detected, what will be done, and by whom. Legislative Oversight Chair Talina Nelson says an informational hearing with the Navy is scheduled for May 10th.
We welcome your recommendations and we welcome your ideas because we can't do this alone. We also need the community's help, and we don't know everything. We don't have all the answers. And I think that's okay to say that as policymakers because really, the communities also are the ones that educate us in these type of areas.
For KUAM News, I'm Nestor Lecanto.
Viva, I think it's really important and powerful that young people are facing our leaders and calling on our leaders. And as Senator Nelson pointed out, educating our leaders, which is really incredible. The next question I wanted to pose is, how might understanding these issues with our water help youth when it comes to thinking about their independent futures on our island?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think I can speak just from personal experience. I've been mentored really closely by you and by so many others in Independent Guåhan. I think just being in those spaces and being empowered to look at our history from a way that's empowering, because it's often either we're not taught about it or it's this narrative of things being taken from us and not understanding all that's been passed down to us, or just really this incredible genealogy of resistance that's always existed in our islands and in our people. So I think just being in those spaces and reclaiming our history and fighting for our future in this way, I think that's also a form of freedom. You were talking earlier about the concert being a place for us to express what freedom is. I think also just being mentored by activists and focusing on youth leadership, that's also a place for us to experience what sovereignty can mean in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, definitely. Bella, for you, just kind of coming out of high school and starting your adult life, how has this work been transformative for you?
Like I said earlier, it really has been a time of growth for me being in this program alone, because I definitely was, trying my best to advocate in the way that I knew how, through social media and stuff like that. But being mentored under Protect Guam Water and meeting so many different people and coming out to these spaces has been just incredible. I can't even describe how amazing it's been. And I feel that being under Protect Guam Water, it's also been, I guess, a shift in the way that I do my activism, because it's very strategic and it's so much more structured than I otherwise would have thought. And so that has been a really great time, and it's opened my eyes to so much. I really appreciate being under Protect Guam Water, and I'm happy to continue working with them.
Yeah, I think those are some really good tips, right, for people interested in wanting to organize or speak out about issues, or really fight for a better future for the island, right? Identify your mentors, learn new ways of communicating, be very organized and clear in your strategy I think those are really important things for people to consider. So it looks like we've got some more questions coming in. This next viewer says, "Sizo Ismaasi Protect Guam Water, would it be feasible to consider a lawsuit against the military like with the open burn, open detonation issue?"
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great work that Protect Texan is doing in Earth Justice in terms of exploring legal options. We also have contracted an attorney, and I know that we are looking at some legal options, but right now our focus is really just on the youth cohort and on community outreach. So I think there's definitely a need for all of these approaches, right? Through doing lawsuits, advocating and educating elected officials, working with youth, classroom presentations. I think all of that is needed. And yeah, so what we're focusing on right now is more on the kind of community education side.
Great. I want to pause just a little to acknowledge some of the comments coming in about Senator Pilar Lujan. One person commented that Senadora Pilar was a pioneer in so many ways. Her and Senator Marilyn Manabusan and later Senator Hope Cristobal were some of the few female elected officials in the 1970s and 80s advocating for political status and self-determination. Another person commented that this is very special for the Lujan family, from husband and wife as Senators Frank and Pilar, who were some of the most critical minds of their time, to their daughter, Justice Manessa Lujan, who IG Independent Guåhan did also honor as a Maga'taotao for her work in really making our court system more responsive to our community. So yes, absolutely. I believe that Senator Lujan and her family have really shown us what it's like to be in positions of power, in leadership positions, and still be brave and bold in taking on these issues. And I think, just thinking back to some of the earlier questions about our leaders and about the upcoming election, we really need to think about that. Like, if 30 years ago, someone like Senator Lujan was saying the things that she was saying, and today we don't hear these same messages anymore, what's happening in our leadership, right? Why are people not taking on these issues as strongly as they did before? And how can we encourage them to do that? How can we continue to engage them, as we saw Protect Guam Water do in the clip that we just watched? The next question is, how large is Protect Guam Water, and are there clubs in high schools or at UOG?
Yeah, so right now we are, myself and Kiana Shinkab are project managers, and then we just have a small cohort of around 5 youth who are kind of in the youth cohort with us, working on community outreach as well. And we don't at the moment have clubs outside of our org in high schools or at UOG, but I think that would be a really great idea. Like, part of what we're focusing on as well is working on a version of the presentation that we shared that can be available to anyone who wants to deliver it in their classroom, in their community centers, or even within communities off island. So we're really working on making this information something that's accessible and something that can be disseminated widely. We have been holding regular monthly meetings on Zoom, and that's one way that people can kind of tune into our work and the resources that we're providing and become involved. But yeah, I think that's definitely something that we're open to in the future. If anyone wants to collaborate with us, we just encourage you to send us a message on our Instagram or social medias, and we're very open to growing in those ways.
Yeah, definitely. And with Bella joining the Tomorrow Studies program, that'll be a really wonderful bridge. All right. The next question is, will there be any upcoming demonstrations or events that folks can look forward to participating in solidarity?
Yeah, so the big thing that we're having is organizing our public hearing, which will be at some point in August. We will, of course, share more information as it gets closer, but we're really hoping to have a lot of community presence in terms of people sharing their testimonies. I think it's great to have that stuff on record, but it also has just become a really powerful space for education. I know I've learned a lot, like just listening to other people's testimonies at hearings that community groups have organized past. And we're also looking to have some sort of community event, possibly concert or open mic that we're looking to schedule ahead of the public hearing to kind of increase education and momentum as we get to that point. And we will be sharing that information as it comes out.
Great. The next question is, I am from this person is from the diaspora doing all that they can to reconnect with their roots and really thinks the Vista Del Mar and Epal Park projects are terrible ideas and bad for the island in so many ways. But they've clashed with their cousins on island who feel that these projects create jobs and help the island. Should this person be more respectful of them and their opinions on the issue, especially since Guam is not their home, or at least not their daily home?
Yeah, I think that's an issue that so many of us who do this kind of work can relate to, whether we live off island or on island. Something that I would say is when you're in those conversations and it gets really tense, to come back to what you can agree upon. So for example, like when we're doing community outreach, sometimes we encounter people who say we're being overly critical of the military, talk about the benefits of the military to Guam. And in that case, we remind them that what we're really advocating for is clean water, and that affects everybody, including families on the base. And then we would look at examples of Red Hill, where it was families on the military base who were primarily impacted. And if we look at studies with Guam and potential contamination, thinking about all of the people who will be impacted, right? So local families, tourists, military families, everyone who calls Guam home or drinks water on Guam. So I think finding ways to really distill the issue to like, what is the core thing we're actually concerned about here? Ours is water. Everyone drinks water. Everyone needs clean water. Like we talked about, exposure to lead, even in really small amounts, is toxic. We have proof of contamination in our history on Guam. So being able to kind of work past how these issues get entangled with people's political views and coming back to what is the core thing that we can all agree upon, or what are the values that hopefully we all have, and hopefully clean water is one of them.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for everything that you shared today. I want to thank those who are tuning in and sending all their Sizo Isma'asis and Bibas to you for the work that you're doing, Sam and Bella, and Protect Guam Water. I think, you know, as a lot of these questions are looking for opportunity for action and solidarity. So yes, as Sam has and Bella have encouraged, please reach out to them. Please reach out to us at Independent Guåhan. You know, we have strength in numbers. The more our minds and hands come together, the more powerful we will be. Also, we have gotten some interest in our Natlatlat Songs of Freedom concert, questions about our lineup, questions about, you know, how people can get involved. So please just stay tuned, following Independent Guåhan on Facebook or Instagram, as we will be releasing our, you know, our list of acts soon. And any questions that you have, please email us at independentguahan@gmail.com or reach out to us on social media. We're very excited. We can't wait to see all of you at the concert. And we are also very excited for the work that you're doing at Protect Guam Water. And we will also share information about the hearing when it happens, so that people can be involved. So again, Sizo Isma'asi for all of your wonderful work and for being our panelists today. And to all of you who tuned in, we'll see you next month. Adios.